everybody. Welcome. Welcome to the Birkbeck Institute of the Humanities masterclass with Professor Slavoj Zizek. I'm Esther Leslie, one of the co-directors of BIH. So we're really thrilled to have Slavoj here in his birthday week, no less. And I'm sure all of you here know who he is, or you wouldn't be here. Some of you may be new though. You might be here because you're one of the 250,000 people, myself included, who with alarm watched him in discussion with Piers Morgan, uncensored. And you might also be one of the people, Slavoj, I think, and Piers Morgan included, who were very surprised about how much apparent agreement they were in. It seems like you're playing the role, you're being asked to play the role of controversialist a little bit again, with all those most dangerous philosopher and so on labels. But for us, I think he's important as someone who's had a relationship to the Institute and academics here since about 2009, so we're very pleased to have had ongoing discussions, and he is indeed International Director of BIH. I think the latest book about to drop, certainly in paperback, is Christian Atheism, How to Be a Real Materialist. The topic of this session is about the end or the ends of the world and the question of indifference. Slavoj will speak for between an hour and an hour 30. Then there'll be some time for questions. So I shall slide to the side and
thanks very much. My gratitude to Esther. You know, the best of her works, I still remember it, but this was from another era. You wrote a book on American, how do you call it, cartoons, you
animation,
know?
Yeah,
the difference, that there is another tradition and so on. It's very important to know that it's not automatically that we allow all the Disney stuff to monopolize cartoons, you know? Things have often a very interesting history behind. As for that controversiality and so on, I know all the problematic thing I said with Piers Morgan and so on, but nonetheless, it gave me, just before I flew here 3 days ago, still in Slovenia, it gave me an experience which I call intellectual orgasm. I was in some public space as a private person, and there were first some, probably Muslims, not Palestinians, but Arabs, who started to shout at me, Zionist, whatever. Then, behind them, there were some obviously Zionists who, not understanding what they are shouting at me, began to shout at me, traitor, Islamophobic, anti-Semite. And then I liked it how they were both shouting at me, and at a certain point, they noticed each other. What's going on here? You know, all I'm saying that I believe my tactic, not this, just Hamas is a liberation movement and so on, but more moderate, works much better. You know why? I was told, I think I already said this here, the last time I was here, in Germany with my Frankfurt, I will not go again into that, Frankfurt book speech that, like, the attacks on me were much more violent, and a friend of mine, a progressive Jew, explained to me why, than those who simply said Hamas is nonetheless is a resistant guerrilla force and so on. Because it's easy to say, oh, you see, he is there. But hardline Zionists are terribly afraid that me, with my more moderate approach, that I may convince some people, which is what many people notice, how much more violent the reaction is to what I say. Just a brief introductory, another remark, then we move on. This Sunday, I just upon my arrival, I visited Julian Assange, and I was very nicely surprised. He is not in a bad mood because he is learning from his lawyers and so on that he has some chance, which is, it's such a legal trick. He can demand non-extradition from European court, even before the official decision of the British side is rendered public. And he learned how to manipulate Julia. You know that he has connections. He knows people who knew people who are in that court. And he more or less negotiated that they will block it. And there are also some incredible surprises. Maybe Olaf Scholz, the German chancellor, he knows that he went way too much for Israel. So Olaf Scholz, you know, he said publicly, Assange shouldn't be extradited. It's incredible. So he's not in a bad mood, but, and then I will go to my, don't be afraid, my thought. You know what? Nonetheless, I noticed a couple of details which surprised me. In Belmarsh prison, of course, the staff there is very friendly and so on, but that's the trick of modern institution. You know, there is enough repression in the machinery itself so that the staff can be afforded to be oppressive. Like the same thing then the last time I've written about it, I made the test happen. We were sitting there for 2 hours, you are allowed 2 hours, and then I bought a cappuccino there, and like you lady with this cup covered, but I on purpose, when I drank it, I left it uncovered. Immediately a guard came, please sir, you must cover the cup. And again, I asked when I exited why. They said, poor Julian, they said, you know, this is a prison, this one, for the worst criminals, and they are violent. We are afraid, it's so ridiculous that if you have hot coffee, not covered, the bad guy may throw it into your face. No. And of course, I'm an evil guy here. I made for 1 hour fun of Julian, you know that. I should be now afraid. Will you throw coffee? We went on very well, but another thing which is more refined, I noticed. It's a beautiful detail. I asked him, what does he have access to? And here, these details fascinate me. When he was a year ago already married there, no? You know that no photos were allowed. And it's very mysterious. Why? Just guards there, prison guards, took 2 photos of him and Stella, and they were given 3 or 4 printed versions of that photo, but they have to sign a promise that they will not render these photos public. And it's totally crazy because I asked Julian, but what's the point? Okay, let's be totally paranoid. They're afraid that with your photo you cover, or that on the painting there is some background which may give unsolicited information. Okay, why not he can take photos in front of a grey wall of what? No, they insist on this. It's really that he shouldn't have any public presence. Also, why can't he give interviews or have? No, it's strictly prohibited. The irony being that he is not even officially charged of everything. Another detail, and then I go on, it shows that his mind is nonetheless, I'm so evil, more refined than I thought, you know, of Julian. You know, I asked him, what does he have in his room? And he told me, just a radio. I asked him, but couldn't you get a TV? And then he told me, yes, he could, but he prefers not to. And it's very interesting logic, I wouldn't have followed. He said that he has a cell alone. It's still like in old times, 23 hours per day he is alone in his cell. And he says if it's a radio, you don't sit and watch it. You can move around a little bit. While if it's a TV, you have to sit there, but you see all the time the world outside on screen. It reminds you, and he judged that it's better for his health to ignore TV. That precisely because you see all the time on screen the outside, you know. So I was pretty glad, you know. And it's so crazy, the procedure. 4 times in a row, in at different point, you have to give your fingerprint, and I caused a problem because somehow, I don't know what happened. My fingerprint didn't show on screen. And then they almost not arrested, but for me, because you know what was my reaction, evil as I am, perfect, so I can become a thief and they will, you know, no worry about fingerprints, they will not be able to. They don't have my sense of humor, unfortunately. But, okay, so today I hope you will not be too disappointed. I will approach theory. There will be some theory in between, only at the end. In 2 days, I will go more into what I'm working on now, this parallel, but I'm in contact now with so-called big names. I'm now obsessed lately with quantum physics. And the idea is to take this new approach of top-down superpositions and so on and apply it to history. So I will go a little bit into this and then draw some political consequences now in 2 days. Today, let me approach things in a more direct way. I would like to begin with precisely, with all naivety, this topic. Some of this, but I will add things, change, supplement it, was already published on that Substack, which was given to you. But some guys already attacked me. Oh, you are commercializing yourself. I'm sorry, I take great care there that the payable texts are every 4th or 5th text, which are difficult, long philosophical texts. All political texts are free. So, my God, you cannot accuse me of earning quite a lot of money there. Okay, the end of the world. My starting point will be a remark by my good colleague Alenka Zupancic, who noted that one should not expect too much from the end of the world. It may disappoint us. You know how I read this? It's not that in reality it will not be so bad, but it is that we will get so accustomed to it that we will change so that we will not even be aware, we are less and less aware in what kind of deep shit we already are. So I would like to focus here on the underlying assumption of our fear about the end of the world. We silently presume that if we talk and worry enough about it, it may not happen. You know, this is my old storyline. I repeated it here. I will not fully repeat it today. And I know this. I make fun of myself, I remember, as an obsessional neurotic, no? I talk all the time, not in order to say something, but if you talk all the time, you prevent somebody else to raise a really pertinent question, you know. This idea of talking all the time, I was doing this, as I told here a couple of times in my psychoanalysis, no? I talk all the time. The idea was the analyst shouldn't be allowed not even a second to ask me some really annoying question, you know. So I more and more have the impression that this is how we talk all the time about ecological crisis and equality, whatever, exploitation. No, that's the problem, incidentally. We talk much more about equality than about exploitation. But let me go on. So what if the true end of the world will not be a mega catastrophe, but the endless repetition of the same, epitomized by a standard conclusion at the end of an episode in TV series, where you usually read. You give a hint of what will happen next week. So maybe we already live in the end of the world. What does this mean? Okay, now I would like to begin, maybe some of you know the text, I will go further, with my favorite example of where they are really approaching the end of the world. It's South Korea. My friends in South Korea convinced me that South Korea is much closer than Japan today, the country of the end of time, in some sense, of the end of history. You know how the story goes. Alexander Kojève, the great reader of Hegel, and as all great readers of Hegel, it's now clear I have the contact in France with a guy who is editing Kojève's manuscripts. Of course, he didn't read a lot of Hegel. And I agree with him there. If you read too much, you just get confused. All good interpretations, you just read some selected chapters and so on. Okay, but for Kojève, first it was the Stalinist Russia, which was the end of the world. Then he moved to Japan as this post-historical culture of enjoyment, whatever. But my good friend from Korea, Alex Tek Gwang Lee, told me that if Kojève were to be alive today, he would have chosen South Korea. Why? South Korea is arguably the country of free choice, not in the political sense, but in the sense of daily life, especially among the younger, depoliticized generation. The choice we are talking about is the indifferent choice of moderate daily pleasures. The choice among options which don't really matter. What music one listens to, what you read, how you dress, how you socialize and eat, to which foreign country you will go for a holiday. There is a recent movie, not Korean but Japanese, directed by a German guy, you maybe saw it, Perfect Days by Wim Wenders. In this movie, Koji Yakusho plays Hirayama, who works as a toilet cleaner in Tokyo, fully content with his simple life. Following a ritualized daily rhythm, he repeats this rhythm from dawn to the evening and dedicates his free time to his passion for music in his van to and from work and books. So we have a culture here of depoliticized disengagement, like ignore the world, all the crises, enjoy the daily life. My friend assures me that this is now the standpoint of the majority of young people in South Korea. The idea is that, no, it's not that you are totally depoliticized, but just like, okay, maybe you sign some protest against this, that. But the basic point is withdraw into this privacy and without great ambitions, enjoy life. What I can confirm is that when from time to time we hear about the threats from North Korea and all that, people in South Korea that I've met they don't care about it. They think it's all a joke. You can safely ignore it. What people didn't notice, I found this very interesting, is that there was recently a great change in North Korea. People didn't notice it, that North Korea officially abandoned this idea that they are really the only sovereign force, that they should at some point liberate the South. No, it's they silently dropped this. They also dropped the last remainders of whatever you call it, communism, socialist, and so on. In some paradoxical sense, it's a similar attitude than that of the South. Forget about ideology. What matters now in North Korea is just the survival of the ruling nomenclatura, elite. Now, my favorite example, which I'm divided about it, but I like it. And somebody told me, you should teach me here, that it's already spreading here in the UK, in the United States, and so on. The ultimate example which fits this depoliticized lifestyle of younger generation is a unique form of literature, the so-called, they call it web social, the novel on the web. It's exploding in South Korea in the last decades. These web novels turn more money than their biggest company, Samsung, the greatest corporation. Web novels are all produced, distributed, and consumed on the web, and this has brought a big change to the existing publishing industry. The process of producing, distributing, and consuming takes place almost simultaneously. Also, you pay just a little bit. Like, there are mega popular authors who publish one chapter per week, and for this chapter you have to pay like 0.07 euros. What is this? 0.5 pence. It's inexpensive, and again, it's a true popular movement, so maybe there is something emancipatory in it, because there are, the public counts in millions, 10, 20 million, half the population. There are thousands and thousands of writers. So what characterizes this is serialization, a new chapter every week, genre dominance. It's not so much hardcore pornography, but more romances, detective novels, fantasies, and science fiction, plus interaction with readers through comments, like you can intervene and influence the author to change the story. I think that it's maybe too simple to dismiss this as the end of culture proper, because I nonetheless think that these web novels contain an unexpected emancipatory potential. It's maybe, I'm not sure, the rise of a new communist art form. A mostly anonymous crowd forms spontaneous networks in which readers and writers intermix, and the production process is potentially collectivized. The figure of individual genius creator disappears, art loses its elitism and becomes a popular collective process. Now, why do I think there is maybe an emancipatory connection with this? Because a Jewish, very pro-Palestinian friend of mine told me, but something not the same, much more caught in real life, but similar, is happening now in Gaza. Something really interesting. You know that many people who are there, caught in Gaza, and you never know, will you be alive tomorrow or not, are, and if they still have access to internet, are simply day from their individual perspective, spreading their vision, not vision, their daily experience. Like they show their house, oh, you see that house near me, it was bombed, and it's always this thread, will I be alive tomorrow or not? these guys are not journalists risking their lives to report the truth. They are themselves potential victims. And there are wonderful cases of how some of these guys became, in a good sense, I think here, immensely popular. You know, like tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, check every day what is happening with that family or with that guy. I think that this is needed to really got attention. It's not enough this general report, 20,000 or 5,000 whatever, children died and so on. You must have different experience. You must have different experiences. So I think that this is one way, maybe you disagree with me, that this web interaction is not just a vulgarization, but it is an opening to something new. I'm not saying great art will come out of it, but we should be attentive to it. But nonetheless, to return to my main line, what nonetheless worries me with South Korean novels, and it's the same in Japan. Did you read a note, I think 2-3 weeks ago, that Japan dropped now, and with all its crises, Germany is now the third strongest industrial force in the world. But we have sometimes contact, you know, this new Marxist ecologist Kohei Saito. And he told me that, you know, he wrote a book, Slow Down, as the solution to ecological crisis. And he told me that that's the general attitude now of the majority in Japan. Depoliticize, enjoy daily life, step out of this incessant competition, who will be better, will be overtake others, and so on and so on. So maybe something new will happen there, but what worries me is this depoliticization. Because when you exclude politics in this way of let's limit ourselves to our ordinary daily life, the problem is that this works only in a country which is very developed. While worldwide, this excluded political dimension returns with a vengeance. Well, my second part, I also published already a text which I will elaborate more. I think if there is today a symptom of what is going on in the world, yes, even in the world, I would say the symptomal point is not so much neither Ukraine nor Gaza, it is Haiti. I hope you follow the news there, and I will slowly extrapolate it. You know what happened a couple of weeks ago? Literally, criminal gangs simply, almost, not quite, but took over. Gangs already control 80% of Port-au-Prince, of the capital city, and it's not yet clear who will win, but now gangs, criminal gangs, build a collective, and this is the saddest fate that you can imagine. Haiti is the extreme case of a so-called failed state, a state in which people confront a sad choice: the continuing reign of the corrupted democratic elite, or the direct rule of gangs presenting themselves as progressive. But what if there is something progressive in them? I doubt it. I contacted some of my Latino American friends and told them, nonetheless, the main figure, Jimmy Barbecue Cerisier, gang leader, likes to present himself as freedom fighter. He likes to evoke figures like Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Che Guevara, and Fidel Castro, even Robin Hood, But he also admires Papa Doc de Vallier, you know, half a century ago, the brutal dictator of Haiti. So the logic of these gangs is directly that of a brutal massacre. Cerisier said recently, a month ago, we won't lie to people saying we have a peaceful revolution. We do not have a peaceful revolution. We are starting a bloody revolution in the country. So, why do I mention this? Precisely not to draw the conclusion that, you see, Haiti, barbarians and primitives. No, the truth is much, much worse. First, yes, Haiti is an extreme case, but not because of the primitivity of its people. I think that, and Peter Holworth in his book, Damning the Flood, demonstrated this 20, 30 years ago. Even now, Haiti is paying the price for being the first successful slave revolution in around 1800. You know, it was that first Toussaint Louverture and then others. And it's, I think, even for the most liberal, democratic Western leaders, they were barbarians. For example, Thomas Jefferson said, here the line stops. Toussaint Louverture is not human or something like that, and so on. And the only slight hope was a couple of decades ago. You remember when Jean-Bertrand Aristide and his Lavalas party took over, then through discreet American intervention, they ruined this option, and now we are really dealing with a failed state. But should we blame them? No, the first thing to note, not just the obvious fact, external intervention, is that a similar thing, now comes the bad news, first is happening with some other Latino American countries. For example, Ecuador. It's the same. In some cities, gangs, criminal gangs, are no longer secret gangs in the sense of discreetly operating. No, they simply took some streets. They are openly occupying public space. And an even more terrifying example is how the establishment reacts to this. You should follow a guy who calls himself, so I felt some affinity with him, a philosopher king. Literally, it's Nayib Bukele, the president just re-elected of El Salvador. It's something very obscene, in some sense formally similar to Gaza, where you no longer do the mass killing discreetly. We have in Gaza now, okay, a relatively small level, but nonetheless, a Holocaust that you can watch live on TV, no? And we have the same there. This guy, philosopher king, who was incidentally 2-3 months ago re-elected with like Putin numbers of majority, 85%. You know what he did? He mobilized the army and he is proceeding against the gangs in an openly brutal way. Like you have in prison large space like this one, where mostly on the floor there are no beds. You could put like 100 people. He squeezes in 700 people. They even cannot find a small piece, many of them, of ground just to stretch, to lay down. And you know what I find so sad and obscene? It's that this is not discreetly done. This guy, Bukele, the president, openly boasts about it. You can see it on TV all the time. These terrible conditions there. So, the message is absolutely clear. It's not in between lines. It's, if you are arrested, you will have no basic rights. You will suffer beyond what the law permits. Now, let's go on further. Because what interests me, this will be my conclusion, and here I'm really a pessimist, is that our world, not just so-called third world failed states, is approaching a certain dangerous situation where the power itself is no longer able to reproduce itself without relying on half legal or illegal gangs, which are not directly identified with state. Let's mention two other examples. Do you remember how he is forgotten in Russia, Prigozhin Wagner group? It was exactly the same. It was basically a private army gang, and Putin used it to be able to retain a minimum of deniability. You know, sorry, we don't control them, they do it, but Putin needed them. Then I know there was a conflict, Prigozhin took power, no, and this produced one of the best jokes. Did already tell it here. I like this paradoxical joke. You remember how Prigozhin's plane was shot down, you know. Officially it was an accident. Did already tell the last time here, I'm not so sure, this joke which I love. The joke is that the Russian Prime Minister comes to Putin and says, listen, we have so many time zones that it's very difficult. You know, like I called the Chinese Xi president to congratulate him for birthday, but he told me, sorry, here it's already the next day. Then I called Olaf Scholz to congratulate him, and Scholz said, sorry, my birthday is tomorrow, and so on. And Putin said, so we should do something. And Putin says, I like this, Russians still have the spirit of political jokes. Putin says, I agree with you, my God, you know that I called Prigozhin's widow to express to her my sorrow for the death of the family, but then I learned that the plane which fell down didn't even you know. That's where we are. So then let's go 2 steps further. It gets worse and worse. Iran, Revolutionary Guard, also so-called Pasdaran, also functions a little bit like this. You know, it is the state, but not quite. The government is very cautious. For example, when in one of the few beautiful events of the last month, you remember when that Kurdish girl was shot, it triggered the most authentic feminist movement that I know, where the feminists became a focal point of the entire society protesting the regime. And you know, they, like even who is now the boss, Khamenei, I think, even said she deplores it. You know, the point is to have a half illegal gang from which you can maintain a certain distance, but you need it. Now, I hope you know what will come. What will come is horror. But is not, sorry to tell you this, are not the Israeli settlers exactly something similar? And you know, so that you will not think that I'm now paid by Hamas. I got all this from my Jewish friends, my God. I'm more and more sympathetic to true heroes like Jonathan Glazer, the director, and so on. They told me that, you know, the Israeli government, obviously, to do its job, which is now openly clear what they want. Now they openly adopted the slogan, from the river to the sea, but for them only, you know. And it's horrible how something they were denying till now, they openly do it, but they cannot do it directly. So you have, on the West Bank, you have now settler gangs which are literally terrorizing Palestinians there, and then police, if Palestinians call police, police comes and does nothing, or if they do something pretty disgusting. Let's say settlers break into a small Palestinian village and start to beat Palestinians. Then police comes and they say, we will separate the two sides which are fighting. But we are already on the Palestinian territory, you know. So this means they push Palestinians even further out. But what I want to say is that how Israel, here you have a failed state. Also, what they are doing now, constructing a big Israel from the river to the sea, they also cannot even do it, no matter how they twist their law. They cannot do it in a minimally legal way. They have to rely on armed gangs. Not only rely on, but even solicit them. My bad guy, I mentioned him often here, Itamar Ben-Gvir, who was 20 years ago convicted by an Israeli court as a terrorist. Is now, it's a bad joke, Minister of Security of Israel, directly helping these gangs. He gave them 10,000 guns and now he is giving them more guns. So you see what fascinates me. It is how, even in pretty developed country like Israel, it needs illegal armed gangs to function. Now let's go to the top. Okay, we'll say Israel, Middle East, it's a confusion there. What about the United States themselves? Don't you remember Proud Boys, to mention them? They're officially proclaimed a terrorist organization by international law and so on. And I think we should study also their ideology, so that of the Proud Boys, not only they are anti-Semitic, but Trump was never bothered like this, that your main supporter in the United States are anti-Semites and you fully support Israel. But I looked into their programs. I like it so much because it is really, this is no longer my world. Maybe you can teach me where we are moving. You know, what are there of Proud Boys' main rules? One is, they call each other brothers. No heterosexual brother, and gays are prohibited, so it means no member, shall masturbate more than one time in any calendar month. What is happening here? And then they have other rules and so on and so on. Now the idea that came to me here is, you know, Ernst Jünger, a reluctant Nazi fellow traveler, not fully, who, like Proud Boys, celebrated the purifying effect of military struggle. He wrote, it's a quote, "Any power struggle is preceded by a verification of images and iconoclasm. This is why we need poets. They initiate the overthrow, even that of titans." Interestingly enough, this idea that violence that is grounded in poetry was you know who was fascinated by Jünger at this level? She just tried to read, to give a progressive turn to it, violent communist revolution. Bertolt Brecht, when after World War II, Ernst Jünger was under pressure, like nonetheless, in spite of his distances towards Nazism, justifying this basic idea of social violence, and his safety of Jünger was threatened by some communists. Brecht himself published a text where he said, "Leave Jünger alone." Like we can also use him. But what again surprises me with Proud Boys and other groups is something of which I'm far less and less from agreeing him with Yuval Harari. But at one particular point, I follow him, where he said that we live in a strange time where what was once considered a typical leftist rhetoric of violent overthrow, violation of law and order, and so on, is now more and more appropriated by the new right. I made this point often here. For example, you remember the 6th of January 2021, the attack on the Capitol. I told this story here that many of my friends cried. They said, my God, we should have been doing this. And I told them, sorry guys, now this obscene brutality and so on is appropriated by the other side, and I'm saying this here to provoke you. I'm ready to go to the end here and to say that if when I was young we associated being radical leftists with, you know, brutal demonstration, obscene gestures, making fun of those in power. Sorry, the enemy is now much better at it. So, of course, the enemy is a fake here. I mean, that revolution is, of course, nothing. They want changes so that, as the old saying goes, so that nothing will really change. But nonetheless, they are the only ones who openly advocate this violent language. You know that, how's he called, Steve Bannon or what, the great intellectual guru of Trump, defines himself as a Leninist, you know, like the Leninist for the next century, and so on. So, what I'm saying is, and now Trump is, again, he didn't want fully to condemn Proud Boys, you know, he gave that famous stand back but be ready there in the background. Again, even the United States, as people like to say, the ultimate democracy in our world and so on, Trump said openly that if he will lose elections, there will be blood. He will not recognize the result. So, you see what I'm saying? You have reference to illegal gangs as part of the political process. Even in the most developed democracy in our world, and so on and so on. This is where we are today. So again, the sad lesson of such a role of criminal gangs is that today Western democracy itself is less and less fully applicable even in the developed West itself. And here we should maybe even formulate a doubt about democracy itself, the way we understand it in the West. In what sense? John Elster, I think I already quoted him the last time here, the Norwegian theorist of rational action, remarked apropos the notion fashionable today of democracy under threat. He said we can reverse the common dictum that democracy is under threat and affirm that democracy is the threat, at least in its short-term populist form. Because the true problem, for example, in more and more Western European countries, is that what if the anti-immigrant right-wingers and so on take over democratically? It is happening. Sweden, Norway, not yet fully, but that's the tendency. So again, what does this mean for the United States? I used in some of my late texts the latest version I invented it. The first time I am not only retelling jokes, but I invented a joke. From, there is an old communist dissident joke against communist politicians, but I applied it now to the West and to the world. The jokes goes like this, my version. The three strongmen today, Putin, Xi, the Chinese strongman, and Trump, are allowed briefly to meet God. And each of them is allowed to ask God one question. First, Putin said, "Tell me, dear God, what is the future of Russia in next years?" God said, "Not so good. Even if you win in Ukraine, Russia will be in a decade or so Chinese economic colony." Putin turns around and starts to cry. You must know the story. Then she said, "Oh, what about us, China?" God says, "It's also not so good. You may control Russia, but you are now also in an economic crisis, so either you will have to return to hardline rule, which will be economically a catastrophe, or you will have to not only not to occupy Taiwan, but plead for Taiwanese help, open yourself to Taiwan." She turns around, a woman, she ex-idol, and starts to cry. Then you can guess the finish. Then Trump said, "Oh, what will happen with the United States if I win next elections?" You know the answer. God turns around and starts to cry. And I think God was here right to do this. You know why? Because it's easy to make fun of those half authoritarian countries. But nonetheless, even when we criticize the West, we rely on notions, rely on notions which still belong to the Western Enlightenment democratic tradition and so on. And what is now disappearing with Gaza tragedy and so on is this, let's call it, Western democratic values themselves. It's a catastrophe, I think so. Why? Let's first return to my doubt about democracy. I think I didn't use this here. You know this Abraham Lincoln well-known saying, but he didn't invent it. He just, everything was already said, I claim. And we live in this kind of world. I found a podcast this morning when I was awakening, where a wonderful one, where they said, now each week hundreds of new songs are composed. And we already arrived at the level of saturation where for every new hit song, you can find at least 5 or not 10 from the last decades, songs which basically exactly the same melody. It's saturated, you know, we cannot stop. Again, this Lincoln saying, you can fool all people some of the time and some people all the time, but you can never fool all people all the time. I respectfully disagree. I would say most people can avoid being fooled some of the time, and some people can avoid being fooled all the time. But most people can never avoid being fooled all the time. I think that we have to accept this. What do I mean by this? You know, the whole history of Marxism is, we know this, it's an old story, is under the shadow of this problem. For Marx, there was a subject in whose material position the emancipatory, radical emancipatory dimension was inscribed. Working class proletariat, which, as they say, have nothing to lose but their chains. And as we know, the entire history of Marxism was then in search when there was doubt if traditional working class can do it, a search for another ersatz subject. The illusion of, I know I was there, young, but I was there, 68 events is that students are playing this role. Students will be it. Then the Maoist illusion was still farmers. That's why he was sending thousands of intellectuals, even if they were not great dissidents, like my friend, now he's very official in China, I'm afraid of it, Wang Hui. He even now praises, yes, I was taught much of wisdom. He was exiled to some small village of farmers for 2 years at the time of the Cultural Revolution. So as if you learn some ultimate wisdom from poor farmers. Then we have today Alain Badiou's ideal new subject are what he calls nomad proletarians, immigrants without any deprived of their roots, free floating and so on. I doubt it. I don't think it works like this. So I think we have to accept this, that it's always a combination of groups. We cannot elevate one group into the privileged agent of radical change. But okay, let me go on so that I don't get lost. I would like to return to my crucial point, which is to cut a long story short, the end of Europe. Europe as an Enlightenment tradition. Because some of my pro-Zionist German friends, and because of this they are no longer my friends, you know. I just repeat here a wonderful joke by Lacan, you must know it. It's an old anecdote. When Lacan uses this as a logical paradox, he says, male chauvinist standpoint, my fiancée is never late for an appointment, because the moment she is late, she is no longer my fiancée, something like this. But what I want to say is that, again, they claim that in spite of all excesses, abuses, we should support Israel because it is the only island of freedom and democracy, in short, the only island of Western civilization in the Middle East. My answer is yes, unfortunately, and this makes it much worse. That is to say, if you ask a guy from Gaza, what about European human rights? His answer is yes, I see them falling on us in the shape of bombs every day. So here, maybe I already mentioned here half a year ago, but this is for me the crucial insight. I would like to quote Arundhati Roy, a very progressive Indian writer and essayist. Her starting point is this one, that of course our Western developed moral edifice is hypocritical. It always already was. Human rights were never truly universal, and so on and so on. But Arundhati Roy's point, apropos of Gaza, is that nonetheless, in spite of this hypocrisy, human rights nonetheless functioned, how should I put it, as a kind of a minimal moral compass, which could be then applied also against the West, like these are your human rights, but you are violating them, and so on and so on. But Arundhati Roy says that with what goes on in Gaza, the moral architecture of Western liberalism will cease to exist. It was always hypocritical, we know, but even that provided some sort of shelter. The shelter is disappearing before our eyes. I think this is a much more complex and deep insight than it may appear. Crucially, Arundhati Roy's idea that in spite of its hypocrisy, or maybe even because of it, the liberal moral edifice nonetheless provided some sort of shelter. You know who gave a wonderful example here? I think already in late 30s, Gandhi. Now I'm a little bit more defensive about Gandhi, because 10, 20 years ago I was more against him because of the more secular tradition of Ambedkar and others. But now I learned that Gandhi is openly attacked by Modi and the gang which rules India now. No, he's considered practically a traitor. But nonetheless, Gandhi visited London in late 30s, I think, and he was thought about, like in this patronizing Western way, maybe do you think we can implant democracy in India? No. Would you agree with this? And Gandhi, you must know his answer, which was, you understand that democracy is a very interesting idea. It would be good to try it once. But, so, yes, it was some kind of a, it provided till now some kind of a shelter. And it even worked, why not, half authentically. I remember when there were in 1989 Tiananmen demonstrations, you know, one of the things that protesters did on Tiananmen Square was they built a rather primitive reproduction of the Statue of Liberty. And the Western enlightened leftist intellectuals laughed at them. Haha, so primitive. Don't you think that the Statue of Liberty stands for American imperialism and so on? No, it didn't stand for that in the eyes of the protesters. They simply projected onto the Statue of Liberty what they really wanted. But freedom, safety, welfare, and so on. But now I think this is over. And I don't think it's a good thing, because what will not happen, I'm open to your criticism here, is that this Western notion of human rights will be replaced by some more radical emancipatory notion. I don't see that happening. I think that we are returning to a much more brutal world of direct violence. The stronger guy wins. A new world where you can simply ignore kind of a normative logic or of, but is it right what we are doing? Now, let me give you another example of what I found quite shocking, in some sense the end of the world. Well, the world, I don't mean the universe, but the world of symbolic shared values and so on. You know that the ethnic cleansing of Gaza is no longer a secret plan that has to be brought out through detailed analysis. It is simply becoming the official policy. Israel has already held talks with several countries from Congo to Saudi Arabia for the potential absorption of the Palestinians from Gaza. But I want to point out, and incidentally, you know whom they tried to hire to do this for Israel, to go around Middle East countries and inquire into are they ready to accept the Palestinians from West Bank, not only from Gaza, none other than Tony Blair.
No, of course.
Yes.
Of
So
course.
you know where we
Of
are.
course.
No. Okay, but what I want to say is that what really did shock me, what shocked me is the fact that this is possible. It's that the term that Israeli politicians use now is that of voluntary resettlement, or the term is resettlement as a humanitarian gesture. I mean, I found this just shocking. Israel claims that to organize for all Palestinians of Gaza emigration to another Arab country is a deeply humanitarian concern, because they're aware that that's the only way to provide for their safety. Now, the shock is, of course, but who is making Gaza not safe? Israel with bombing and so on. So this type of brutality is, for me, quite shocking. How the oppression at its worst is justified through in humanitarian terms. In this sense, I think, if this, you can sell this as humanitarian approach, and there was, I like these details, a couple of days ago, an interview of some official CNN journalist, a woman, with Netanyahu, where, but it no longer matters, where he was, as I call it, caught Netanyahu with his pants down. Check it. What happened was that Netanyahu was giving his usual stuff while Israel is blocking humanitarian help, the trucks with food to northern Gaza. And he said, because Hamas takes it over. But then this journalist lady, I think we need more common sense today, did something wonderful. She just quoted Netanyahu himself from a month ago when he said, northern Gaza is now clear, no Hamas there. And she asked him a simple question. Why then block humanitarian help when you claim that there is no Hamas now in northern Gaza? And you should watch this. You can immediately Google it. It was counted. And Netanyahu was so shocked that for 24 seconds he was silent and so on. And then he somehow mumbled some total nonsense. Yes, maybe they don't have arms, but some individuals of Hamas are still there. And then he went even a step further and said something, even if they are not formally Hamas, they are sympathetic to Hamas and so on. It's just horror. So, to come close to the end, before I conclude, a more theoretical point. Now, since we are all here marked by big European progressive traditions, Frankfurt School and the so-called French thought not only this, but still this is the big presence, I would like to draw attention to a very sad thing that is now going on in Germany, which is that, I don't think this already happened when I was here, the last time that Habermas, who is now de facto a German state philosopher, Habermas, together with two others, Rainer Forst, who is his big successor, the younger generation, and another guy, who published 2 months ago a statement where they fully supported Israel with this usual bullshit, you know. It's nonetheless the only democracy there, and so on and so on. It's a good thing for Germany that immediately 100 theorists, professors close to Frankfurt School published a counter statement. And now my concluding point, they said something quite interesting. What a difference there is between the older generation of Frankfurt School, whose greatest achievement is, for me at least, the book by Adorno and Horkheimer, The Dialectic of Enlightenment. The idea being that even the horrible phenomena that we saw in the 20th century, fascism, let's include Stalinism, colonialist murders, that this is not simply some remainder of pre-Enlightenment tradition, but that it's part of the inherent contradiction, antagonisms in the Enlightenment project itself. The point is not, so let's return to some mythic pre-modern thinking. No, the point is that, as I forgot who somebody says in a beautiful way, paraphrasing Walter Benjamin, that to be truly civilized means you should all the time be aware how your own position the more it appears neutral, progressive to you, is always on the edge of barbarism. Barbarian enemy is not up there. You are in it. Begin with this self-critical point. And the sad thing, and here, so that I save my attitude as nonetheless a little bit of a philosopher, not just political talk, here it's Franco Bifo Berardi wrote a short text where he, in a wonderful way, points this out. How this Habermas, from the very beginning, rejected. He even wrote a text already 30 years ago, 40, against dialectic of enlightenment. He claims that no, we need simply progress, more enlightenment, no self-critical dialectic of enlightenment. His idea, the title of his book says everything. Enlightenment as an unfinished project. So we don't have enough of enlightenment, and I think that here we see how this new phase of Frankfurt theory with Habermas makes this fatal step from critical thinking to basically state philosophy of the establishment. Habermas has a long tradition here of being an ultra pro-Western conformist. I remember 30 years ago when the East Germany broke down, some East German public figure, writers, dissidents, all of them, said that nonetheless East Germany shouldn't be simply integrated into West Germany, but that maybe there is something in the East German everyday experience, and they didn't mean to praise the German Democratic Republic. They meant more the forms of public solidarity which developed as a protest, that maybe since the West was caught in consumerism, indifference, and so on, maybe, and this was quite a common idea at that point, that in some cases of the disintegration of socialism, the first movement was not reactionary nationalist. It was really, in some sense, even naive socialism. You know who is here? Not my hero. He is now too much cut. But he, Adam Michnik, the Polish dissident, made a wonderful statement some 15 years ago. You know, he was a big dissident, and then now he's the main owner of Gazeta Wyborcza, the most important Polish daily newspaper. And at some reception with some Western idiots, a guy approached him and said, I congratulate you. You not only overthrew socialism, but you are now a successful capitalist, and so on. And he nonetheless, Michnik made a beautiful statement. He said, sorry, you get me wrong. My problem is that I am not a capitalist who laughs at socialism. I am a socialist who will never forget really existing socialism about how it fails. The idea was, but we have to remain. And back to Habermas, the figures were Christa Wolf, the big East German writers, and some others. And Habermas reacted with full paranoia. The idea was, no, we should not in any way accept that we can learn anything from East Germany. He even, in a typical liberal paranoia, claimed that remainders of Nazism will be smuggled into United Germany in this way. That if you don't fully accept West Germany, it means the only thing we can take from Eastern Europe is totalitarianism. So this is, I think, what is so sad about the situation in Germany itself, that this politics that we see now, and Germany is getting totally crazy. Did you follow when a Jewish and a Palestinian, both Israelis, made a documentary on what is happening on the West Bank? And they got a big prize at Berlinale. I met her. She pretends to be a nice lady, but it's not. Claudia Roth, the Minister of Culture of Germany. She was caught applauding them. And then she was immediately attacked by right-wingers that, you know the logic. By applauding that movie, she's really applauding the destruction of Israel, and so on. And she immediately broke down and made a totally absurd statement that she was really applauding just the Israeli guy, just the Jewish guy, not the other guy. And maybe you read, I forgot where I published it, some short comment where I said, where I proclaimed Claudia Roth to be a big Zen Buddhist master, because you know, I found a Japanese Zen Buddhist who wrote a whole treatise of how you are deeply in Zen enlightenment when you learn how to clap one hand. I mean, it was so sad that she, who considers herself not the worst, open to Palestinian suffering, that she, not even the right, pronounced the formula. And the formula was, it's shocking, the formula was, she openly said it, you are now allowed to say Palestinians are suffering. But you must always add in the same line of argumentation, but it's not the guilt of IDF, but the guilt of Hamas. Like they're basically, if you don't add this, you are anti-Semitic, you want the destruction of Israel, and so on and so on. Because my friend Udi Aloni talked with her 2 months ago at some reception there, and asked her what's going on. She asked her why she also joined the critics of me at my friend, and it's so disgusting what she told Udi. She said, you know, at the level of argumentation, she said she agrees with me, but it was not the right moment to say that. I heard this at least 30, 40 times from my German friends. Privately, I agree with you, but it's not the right moment. And my answer is, so when will be the right moment to say this? I have an exact answer. When it will no longer matter if you say it, I know. Now it's the right moment because now it means something to say that publicly. And again, to conclude with an ultra provocation, you know where, if you don't believe me, where you can see the, back to, conclude with Habermas and so on, I hope you will agree with me here that this is a wonderful example where you can see how a totally abstract philosophical position. Are you naively pro-enlightenment, which should go on, or do you admit an inner antagonism which makes enlightenment itself self-destructive measured by its own standards? How this is not just an abstract theoretical position, it immediately influences how we relate to Gaza today. I mean, and again, which is why I think that Germany is on the path of simply irrelevance, as long as Germany will remain Habermasian, to put it like this. I mean, it's, in one of my comments, maybe you read it, German fake or what, I really think that an appropriate gesture at this point would be more than to boycott Israel. There are still there guys which are not radical enough, but good guys, very critical and so on, of present government. It's almost more important today to boycott culturally, at least Germany. Germany is the most, it's so disgusting. You know what they are doing, as Bifo Berardi points out, I think I already said this half a year ago here. Their logic is this one. Yes, we were guilty of Holocaust, and how will we repay the Jews to support them when they do a similar thing on other people? You know, it's so absolutely disgusting. And my German friends told me another thing which is crazy. You know that a little bit over 1,000 people were already punished, seriously affected by this struggle against anti-Semitism. You know, if they were considered too sympathetic to Palestinians, you lose a job, you are cancelled from public space and similar things. But you know one data, although in Germany there are, I don't know, 1%, 1.5% of Jews, over 30% of those affected are Jews. So as many people, friends told me, you know, if you are a Palestinian today or Islamist in Germany and criticize Israel, they say, okay, that's normal, we know where you come from. But if you are a Jew who doesn't identify with Israel, you are considered a true traitor. The attack is much more ferocious. So I really think the time has come, maybe culturally, to boycott Germany. Now, so that you will not tell me, that's my, now I have a new quote. The last time I quoted another guy, whom do I trust in Israel? Usually people tell me, but you are a utopian, blah, blah, Listen, you know who are the best analysts? Last time when I was here, I quoted another guy. This time I got even a better guy. Now you will not accuse me of utopianism when I quote ex-bosses of Mossad and Shin Bet. Please read them. They're extremely rational people. You know, didn't they quote it? I don't think so. Ami Ayalan, ex-chief of Shin Bet, who made a wonderful interview where he says it's as simple as that. If we don't give Palestinians a hope, political subjectivity and so on, there will not be safety for us. And then he goes on to the end and even says what Israel should do. First, free Marwan Barghouti, that guy who is a Palestinian Mandela. He led the first two intifadas, but he was always against killing civilians, this type of violence. And everybody knows this secretly in Israel, that he is the right person, he can beat Hamas in elections, he is a cult figure like 20 years in prison, Mandela. At the same time, he renounces violence. But you know, I made a couple of times when I made some trips recently to, I don't know, Netherlands, up and down, I did a wonderful experiment. When I smelled that I am in hardline Zionist circles, they asked me, okay, you are bullshitting, it's easy to criticize Israel, but what's your solution? Without attributing them to Ayalan, I quoted his statement. And I was interrupted as this is anti-Semitic bullshit and so on and so on. You see where we are. People there, secret police, I'm more and more getting so desperate that I'm saying sometimes secret police is better than the people. Because in Israel, you know, this is a sad thing. According to the last opinion poll, 93% of the Jews in Israel are against two-state solution. What was an eccentric view a couple of years ago, that it's Israel who should be from the river to the sea, is now the majority, you know. And my good friend, you should listen to him, Tamer Nafar. He lives in Lodz, then suburb of Tel Aviv, which is a small Palestinian enclave, and he's absolutely not violent. He's even now from time to time published in Haaretz. He put it so nicely, he said even the liberal Jews, when they allow him some public appearance, the first question is always, but do you reject Hamas? You know. And he provided a perfect answer. or rather, the question is usually, but do you secretly support Hamas? And his answer that he now repeats is, although you hardline Zionists try in all possible way to push me towards Hamas, I still resist that. You know, I don't want to do that. So, but isn't this sad that in Israel today, again, the not most, but almost only rational proposal, which is self-evident, a proposal which, if you do it in Germany, you will be instantly attacked as anti-Semitic. It comes from Sinn Bet leaders, from the secret police, and I'm here, I warn you, very ambiguous. I remember in my own country, and in Russia even, don't underestimate, this is horror, I want to shock you, don't underestimate the progressive aspects of secret police. You know why? Because, yeah, they do horrible things, but at the same time, they are brutal in the sense of they know the real state of things, you know. For example, in Slovenia, it was the same. It was tragic to discover when socialism was falling apart that the worst to stick to the old regime were corrupted Communist Party intellectuals. Secret police was the most progressive. Why? Because they simply knew the real state of things and so on. So, just 3 concluding points, and it's over. First, you know, the key game played by Israel now is to claim Ben-Gvir, Smotrich, and those hardliners are just a crazy minority of fundamentalist radicals. They are usually mocked by the Israeli establishment, but nonetheless, their stance determines the actual politics of the state of Israel. That's the problem. That's the deep cynicism. That even if they are not openly praised by the establishment, they are determining the actual politics. In other words, what the silent majority wants in Israel is not really to stop the oppression on the West Bank, but like, please do it a little bit more discreetly, you know, not so open. The second thing, you know, I accepted at the beginning the idea that Hamas attack should be condemned, but what was from the very beginning problematic for me was this rejection to contextualize it, as if by contextualizing it you are half justifying it. You know whom I don't think I already had that quote when I was here the last time. You know who is my hero here, as always? Primo Levi, you know, the ultimate memory, if this is a man, si questo è un uomo. He put it so wonderfully. He said, of course we cannot understand Auschwitz if by understanding we mean like they're humans like us and so on, but we should analyze it. He said, if we don't analyze it, it will repeat itself. And precisely this is still absolutely prohibited. Did you notice how even now in Germany it's worse and worse? The Hamas attack is not analyzed. It almost acquired a metaphysical status as an absolutely abyssal act of evil, which grounds then everything that comes afterwards. Israel killed 30,000 people, no problem, it's Hamas' responsibility. I think that the least we should do now is to say the same about what Israelis are doing now in Gaza. That it's an act which should not be normalized as just a reaction to the horror that happened before and so on and so on. It should be judged on its own. They are doing this, and it's not legitimate to say, yeah, but look what Hamas did there. No, it should be judged on its own. And as I already said, my big conclusion, what is now dying in the ruins of Gaza is nothing else than the European idea of universal emancipation. With its self-humiliating servitude to the US and to Israel, Europe put the last nail into the coffin where its emancipatory legacy will be buried. And again, I think that Trump has now a chance because, again, the last time already I mentioned this, that I know guys who know guys who know guys who at the end knows people in the White House. And they told me, or a couple of them I know, the same story, that Biden, who, let's admit it, in inner politics, he is not so bad. He was the first president of the United States to went to support, you remember, the auto workers strike and so on. But the story I learned is that he thought that if he endorses a more militant stance in Ukraine and now Israel, that this will make people forget his senility, blah, blah, and make him appear more masculine. But he terribly miscalculated it. Because now he is so systematically humiliated by Netanyahu that he appears weaker than ever. Wasn't this a shame? You remember a couple of weeks ago, United States, superpower, had to drop by air the supplies into Gaza. Where is the good old imperialist United States that we all loved? Which should say this, fuck off IDF. Give us a landing there, we will come and so on. You know, no, all of a sudden they behave as, and so one really asks ourselves, where are we going? So, where are we going? It is said, again, we are really approaching gang rule, new forms of racism, European legacy is over. Is there any hope about this 2 days from now? And again, I will begin with quantum physics. It will be a much more serious reflection of how we are obliged to change our entire, even, let's call it, ontology of history. What happens in history, in what sense is history open, how we retroactively introduce order into it, and so on and so on. So where am I now? What's the time?
Oh, my watch died, but we've got about half an hour for discussion.
Oh, then it's perfect. That's
okay.
What I... Yeah. Perfect.
Okay, super.
Please, now I'm here open to your criticism. How will you do it? I need a or you will do it.
Yeah. Okay, so indicate with your hand.
If you will agree with me, I don't think the solution is to say we should step on our shoulder and look into the future and so on. We should, I think, the only way to do this is not directly to say we work for our children or what, but simply to fully engage in fights here. I believe in naively in full engagement, and I will give you an example, and please don't accuse me of being an Islamist fundamentalist. You should watch, did you see the two versions of Le Carré's novel, the two cinema versions? What was that? Sorry, the girl, the drummer, what was that one? Little Drummer Girl, yes. There was with Diane Keaton, the movie version, and then there was, with Florence Pugh, no, the 6, you noticed sexist undertone, 6-part miniseries. But you know which is for me the nicest moment, and ethically I don't agree with the guy. That guy, I forgot his name, who is the terrorist, whom, you know, he is convinced by Israel's Secret Service to pretend to join the Israeli terrorists, no? And the final scene is that the main Israeli terrorist who prepares a bombing, she half of seriously begins to love him. They spend a night together, And then in the morning, the terrorist, when he awakens, immediately senses that there is something wrong, like cows are not hurt, which means somebody is already surrounding the building, and sooner or later he guesses she works for the police. And then comes quite a beautiful moment where he looks at her and she confesses, crying. And you would expect an evil terrorist would shoot her, torture her. No, she just looked at her and said, but why did you do this? Are you a Jew? Were you blackmailed by Zionists? Were this, that? And you know what's so tragic? Look at it. You live in totalitarian country, you cannot. You know in what sense then? Here in the UK, I'm Slovenia, we are a free country, which means nobody controls Pirate Bay and that. No fear that you will get a bit. So I downloaded both cinema versions. It's even better than in the novel. When the guy asks her, are you a Jew? Are you pro-America or what? He doesn't mean it, the terrorist, as a critique. He means it as, do you believe in anything? Do you have an engagement? And his horror is when he realizes that the girl doesn't believe in anything, that he did it under, that there is no engagement. And he then doesn't quickly kill her. He just caresses her and says something like, I'm very sorry for you, and allows himself to be killed. I don't agree with him, a terrorist, but it's nonetheless a beautiful moment where, again, you see how he is horrified by her lack of belief, lack of engagement. You know how, although he was put in service by Israel's Secret Service, he even is not really engaged in that. And that's where we are. That's what I meant with that. Sorry, I love South Korea. Bibimbap is my favorite food. But that's what I like with this. I don't like with this, disengaged stance, enjoy life and so on. No, I'm here quite traditional. We have to have an engagement, and full engagement. That's why you remember, did I already talk about this, about my experience? No, I didn't hear. I love this. My experience with Oppenheimer. You remember in India, I was so attacked. You remember a quarter of hour into a movie, you have a sex scene, Florence Pugh with Oppenheimer. And then one, I forgot who, asks the other while they are making love, could you read me Bhagavad Gita? And you remember India immediately protested, no? Many in India, okay, that how could they spoil the sacred text with a dirty sexual scene? And my reaction was the opposite one. I got many hate mail from India. It was that, what if it is the opposite? A beautiful love scene is spoiled by a pretty nasty book, Bhagavad Gita. And you know what's my foundation there? You must know the story. I know I mentioned this, that you know that Bhagavad Gita, I'm not saying it's a Nazi book, I'm not crazy, but Bhagavad Gita was the favorite book by Heinrich Himmler. Why? Because his answer, maybe I mentioned it, was precisely this one. The Nazi SS officer had to do horrible things. Kill, starve Jewish children, women. How can they do such horrible things while retaining their entity? And he looks the answer in Bhagavad Gita, which is act as a distance. At a distance, don't identify with your acts. So here I am for, very sorry, I will use this term, for the one good things in Judeo-Christian Muslim, I'm very open, tradition, which is, I think, more a stance of total engagement. Don't be afraid to be fully engaged. The typical corporate logic today, and I read a good analysis where they look at big corporate bosses, name them, Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, and so on. In order, the most popular spiritual stance among them is pseudo-oriental meditation. It's precisely the idea that we are causing catastrophes all around the world, but do it at a distance. Don't identify with your acts. And to avoid a misunderstanding, I'm not saying that all Oriental meditation, whatever, is necessarily this. For example, from my good Japanese friend, not Kohei Saito, but Kojin Karatani, he told me that there is, I forgot his name, I mentioned somewhere, a very intelligent, from 1920s, 30s already, Japanese Zen Buddhist theorists who read Buddhism in a total opposition to usual reading. Not realities out there, don't engage fully in it, but his idea is, no, you are void, there is nothing in you. All that is out there. So he wonderfully notices that if you take seriously the Buddhist stance, or I don't, me as an ego, I don't have any substantial content, I am a void, it means precisely all there is outside of you. And he then very intelligently, this guy, shows that this idea of Buddhism as a withdrawal into your interior is already a Western falsification of Buddhism. They project onto the East this distance, my shitty inner life and outside reality, and then you withdraw into yourself. You know, I'm not afraid of full engagement. Sorry if I was too long.
Okay, who's
I
next?
had one last comment. Sorry.
Please.
Very quick.
Yeah. So I'm afraid that the full engagement could eventually unify with the participation, and then we have kind of Nietzsche's anti-world, which is like the classic ending for the root of Dionysus, which is the sparagmus, which is just splitting your body apart. So then we have full participation, but with zero engagement.
Yeah, but what do you mean here? You should be, sorry to interrupt you, more precise about Nietzsche, because what we are, I am half convinced, not fully, by those readings who claim that nonetheless, for our situation today in the developed West, Nietzsche's notion of the last man is quite appropriate, I think. I think Nietzsche, I never liked Nietzsche, I admit it, but my good friend Alenka Supancic, in her book The Shortest Shadow, convinced me that Nietzsche is much more refined. What Nietzsche develops as this slave morality and so on, if you read him closely, maybe even it wasn't always clear to Nietzsche, is not actual lower class, but this bourgeois pseudo-new ruling class, which are really weak slaves to the capital and so on. So that what Nietzsche is attacking as a slave morality is bourgeois morality. It's not, and here I agree with, although we are now in very better relations, with Alain Badiou, who even goes, maybe for my taste, a little bit too far, where he says that he even uses, Badiou, the term of workers' aristocracy, not in the Lenin sense, you know, privileged worker, but in the sense that to working class hero, why shouldn't we attribute them a progressive version of this aristocratic stance of I don't care, I risk everything, and so on, you know, that there is, horrible as it may sound, and some progressive element in aristocratic stance which fits perfectly the fight, the struggle of the oppressed. But okay, I don't want to.
Okay, let's bring another voice in.
So thank you for being here and sharing your thoughts. Just 2 days ago, the theatrical election concluded, and despite how autocratic it is and how there is a massive real support for Putin in Russia, in our so-called collective West, we believe there are many people that do not like Putin, and there is protest against him, and we even have convenient opposition figures and groups such as the murdered Alexei Navalny, his team, bloggers Maxim Katz, and political candidates that are not permitted into the elections. But what they espouse things that are nice to our ear, but what do we actually see them doing? Navalny's widow wife and Maxim Katz, they call anti-Putin, anti-war Russian people to come and to vote in protest. Or they say you don't have to vote, but just come, just stand here, spoil a ballot if you want, or join in our protest action of voting at a specific time of day for a specific candidate outcome. Obviously, Putin will draw whatever results he wants at home, but these actions, they increase the voter turnout, they express political engagement, and they increase the regime's legitimacy and its public processes for us in America, for us in UK, and for us in Europe. Even the substitute democratic candidate Ivankov, yesterday in a meeting with Putin, he says that the main mission of Russia right now is to topple the Kiev regime and to be victorious in a special military operation. To me, all this action is like a perfect example of when you said, let him rape you, but look how dusty his balls are. So I ask you, how are we to understand and engage with such an opposition which plays into the hands of the forces behind Putin, time and time out, if not even being controlled and incentivized by them?
It's a very good, tough question, and I will give you a totally frank answer, which is an utterly pessimist one. There are times when not only dusting the balls, but cutting the balls is not possible, unfortunately. You must lay foundation for it. It doesn't happen as a miracle. Okay, I will ask you, what is your answer here?
My answer is is for the people who say they're anti-Putin, anti-war, is to be very suspicious of these forces, of these organizations, which appear to be very Western, very progressive, and for the same things that we want. We don't want Putin, we don't want the secret agent services to control what people think, what people can do, but it does not mean that this apparent good force is leading you down the right path.
Yeah, I agree. I'm here even because people usually misinterpret me as unconditionally for Ukraine. Oh, I can talk for another hour and a half about what I do find problematic in Ukraine. They are making fatal mistakes, I think. But that's another story, but still you didn't answer my question, although we are much more in the situation. I agree with you, but you just gave, in the same sense as I would have done, the negative answer, They are not the blah, blah, blah. Okay. Do you see any positive chance at this moment?
At this moment, no.
You know what? Maybe my logic is very desperate. Remember Gorbachev. He screwed it up. But the problem with Putin is that, remember, again we are coming back to my, sorry for this obscenity, to my admiration of secret police. You know that Gorbachev was basically part of Yuri Andropov gang, no? So again, Gorbachev is the progressive aspect of KGB, horrible as this may sound. Maybe the problem with Russia was that Andropov didn't survive. Andropov had a chance to become Russian Deng Xiaoping, maybe. That's my dream. No democracy, but this type of controlled capitalist opening under maybe even stronger state. But I don't know what he had, leukemia or what, and then it was over. But the important thing, it's a very pessimist solution, is that I don't believe in popular movement from the outside, unfortunately. I think, take Gorbachev, that there must be a crack in nomenclatura itself. And I don't know enough the situation in Russia. I notice, and I find this, it's a horrible event, but funny to comment on it, how if you are a top guy in Russia, isn't it good not to approach too much windows in hotels or hospitals, Many of them fall out and so on, So my point is that I would like to know what is happening behind the scenes in Russia. I was even ready, but you must know more than me there, to see something potentially not progressive, but like disturbing in Prigozhin, He was corrupt, whatever you want. But in some sense, what he said, it was true. He said, Zelensky, Ukrainians are fighting well, We should, at one point he even said we should negotiate with them. The problem is the inertia, the corruption of Russia and so on. We should be here ruthless, that's all I would say. And don't be afraid of any pacts. Exploit all forms of opposition. No, don't be a purist, like, no, we don't talk with that guy. Because, but now at this point, I think, maybe, you can correct me, the situation in Russia is worse than ever. And all that can be done, don't underestimate it, is this, what do moles do? This underground digging, you know, laying the foundation, you know. Obviously, the West was terribly wrong. You remember those dreams a year and a half ago. Putin is on deathbed, he is already, maybe there is a double, Russian economy is in deep shit, and so on and so on. So the first thing I would advise the West is, again, to turn a self-critical gaze on itself. And again, we are coming now back to Gaza and so on. You know what I find most horrible? That Ukraine is totally supporting Israel and so on. The catastrophe is now, look just at the list of countries which congratulated officially Putin. It's almost whole of Latin America, whole of Africa, most of Asia, you know. So look at the world map. It's part of Western Europe, even there are cracks, Slovakia, especially Hungary, United States, Canada, most of Europe, which are for Ukraine, and this is the ultimate nightmare for me, that resistance to Israel in Gaza on the West Bank and Russian aggression of Ukraine are perceived as part of the same struggle against Western domination. This is for me the ultra geopolitical catastrophe. Maybe, I'm not sure, I'm getting old and I notice how I know less and less, you know. I'm afraid to make these statements. Even with China, I'm not sure what's happening there. I have some informers there, let's be serious, friends who are there deep, and from some of them I get the news that the Chinese establishment is in a deep panic now, you know. From others I get that it's not so bad and so on. I don't know what attracts me now is a totally crazy theory. Not that I want to rehabilitate fascism, but theory which I like more and more, that, trigger warning, it's madness, that what Deng Xiaoping really did is organized a passage from communism to fascism. That is to say, forget anti-Semitism. Violent anti-Semitism is something that pertains to Nazi, self-destructive dynamic. But we have a much softer fascism. Even Mussolini, you know that in the 20s, the first decade, Jews were massively also supporting Mussolini. So you have another softer notion of fascism, which is conservative modernization. You want to have technology, fast development, but being well aware, these fascists saw very well, of this self-destructive tendency of too much individualism and so on. You want to control social cohesion through some nationalist ideology and so on. So this is the basic idea of fascism, I think. You get modernization, industrial dynamic, but you try to control social cohesion through some brutal, more or less brutal nationalism. And look, Modi is doing this, in Turkey they are doing this, even Chinese up to a point. The tragedy of China is that it's really now, from what my friends are telling me, taking from Europe what is worst at this moment of the European legacy, a strong nation state. That's why they are now putting more pressure on Uyghurs, on Tibetans. They want to be a nation state. The same with Modi, putting up pressure on Muslims and so on, Erdogan against the Kurds and so on. So I think that again, we should again turn a self-critical gaze upon ourselves. Nation state is the big obstacle towards, again, obstacle to properly confronting the shit that is in front of us.
Okay, we have one more quick question.
A quickie,
And
no? If I
then
may
one
put
more
it
quick
in my
answer,
terms.
a quickie.
Dr. Zizek, just going back to your discussion of states subordinating abstract flows of violence in the form of gangs to maintain de facto rule. I saw a lot of similarities with Deleuze's concept of the war machine and the apparati of capture. I'm reminded of the time it was claimed that the IDF used Deleuze in their raids of Palestinian settlements. Is there any hope of reclaiming micro-political flows of resistance, or do you think that the Deleuzean century, to quote Foucault, is well and truly over?
I think it's over, and I'll tell you why. Do you know, was it in France or Italy that they even translated it? You know what was, maybe you are too young to remember this, but some 20 years ago, Deleuzians were shocked to discover that Israeli secret, not even military theories, elaborated the most efficient strategy how to terrorize, control Palestinians. You know what was his main reference? Not Anti-Oedipus, but Le Mille Plateaux, Thousand Plateaus, the next book. And he even, you know, all this idea, not linear logic, but side and so on, it's so obscene to read. With direct reference to Deleuze, he elaborated the way which was then practiced by Israel of how to invade a Palestinian house where you suspect that there are terrorists. Not directly frontal attack on the main door, but occupy the nearby house, the sideway attack. It was something so obscene, so that this somehow ruined, maybe I'm wrong, I'm always ready to change my mind, but this somehow ruined my trust into effectively subversive, or I don't like the word subversive, let's say emancipatory or whatever dimension of Foucault. Because on the other hand, what I like more about Foucault is, who was the guy, I forgot his name, who Deleuze, who wrote a wonderful book a couple of days ago, years ago, I just forgot his name, The Dark Deleuze. Pointing, sorry?
Nick Land.
Yeah. This was a very interesting book, where he points out that Deleuze is not that happy guy of multitude, we all drive and so on, that there is a much darker side, almost suicidal, self-destructive of Deleuze. And I tend to agree with that. And I'm even, this is not a critique, I'm much closer to that Deleuze. With all religions, even, if I proclaim myself atheist Christian, you know which Christ I like. There is a friend of mine drew to my attention, there is a passage in Matthew, all good things are in Matthew. St. John Gospel is bullshit and so on, I would prohibit it, where Christ knows that there next day he will be crucified, so he's totally desperate and he's sitting with his disciples, and you know what he tells them? Please just stay here with me. No, we'll pray, no, don't worry, everything will turn out well. But this pure despair which Christ, my God, tries to resolve through, just be here with me. You know, these are, for me, the dark moments which every progressive view has to include. So to conclude with the lowest of the lowest, you saw that shitty movie, A River Runs Through It. It's 20-30 years ago, directed by Robert Redford. Brad Pitt plays a young guy, one of two brothers, who is violently self-destructive. And friends try to help, it doesn't work. At the end, he is killed. They found him beaten to death. And then a priest at the funeral ceremony says, and this is, I think, a wonderful atheist Christian stance. The priest says, when you see somebody who is on self-destructive path, and you see that you cannot do anything, like no way to help him, you have to respectfully accept this. And your message to the guy should be, I resign to it. I'm not trying to convert you, to save you. Just be sure that my love is with you forever, even if you are destroying yourself. That, I think that this would be my supplement to what you asked me, that yes, engagement, but with this, as it were, reserve of pure despair, which I think every materialist way approach has to have this B version, what if things turn totally wrong. And that moment is for me this moment of just, let's at least share in a community our horror so that this remains. My God, that scene is wonderful. I think it's Matthew 38, whatever, where you find even another wonderful thing. While Christ is asking his apostles just to be with him, he's not saying, oh, I promise you redemption, fuck it, it's over. But Christ then does something, you know what? He starts to pray. It's wonderful. In which other religion God himself prays? No, you pray to God. As Chesterton pointed out, only in Christianity God himself prays. Because he is lost, it's over. But that's another story. Sorry if I disappointed you, but you see here I'm really a pessimist, because I simply think that the only practical result of all this Mille Plateau Deleuzian politics was this, distrust of the state, multitude, self-organization, Tony Negri stuff, and so on. I don't believe that that works. I simply think that today, it's horror to say, we have to grab as much state power as possible and rehabilitate state. Mm-hmm. And you know who is my informer here? You will not believe it. Alvaro Garcia Linera, my good friend, the vice president of Bolivia. He told me, yeah, we tried to play the multitude, like not just representative democracy, but tribal connections. We organized that all the tribes in Bolivia send their representatives to La Paz. But then he told me, we discovered that this was just corruption, A tribal boss came from province to La Paz, and he was interested either in his own enrichment or in getting just to his tribe more money than to other tribes. So I don't believe that there is a zero level of politicization which would not involve any kind of alienation, or however you call it, And from what I know, I hope I'm wrong, all political attempts that referred to Deleuze did have this illusion that beyond state representation and so on, there is some kind of local self-organization which may do the job. I don't believe in this, but I hope I'm wrong.
Okay, on that note, we'll stop until Thursday when